You're listening to the Cycling Podcast in association with Rapha. Rapha exists to improve your ride with the finest kit, inspiring stories, and vibrant clubhouses across the globe.
Hello, my name's Richard Moore. I'm with Daniel Friebe.
Hello, Richard. I hope you have not been missing me too much.
Oh my goodness me! Have you been practicing that?
No. It's quite an easy impression, Francois, isn't it? You know from.
Oh, sorry, that was Francois.
Oh yeah. Who did you think it was?
No, it's a very good impression of Francois.
No, it wasn't that good. But he is quite easy to impersonate.
He is. No, that was passable. That was passable. And Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard.
Is that Lionel, or is that somebody doing an impression of Lionel?
No, it's me and my little radish-coloured face, having spent too much time in the sun at the Tour.
Yeah, it's fading now, though, isn't it? You've had some nice, refreshing rain on it since you got home.
Yeah, I do live in the garden, like a radish.
How are you, Daniel? Apart from practicing your impressions.
There are all these in-jokes that I don't understand anymore. So I'm slightly discombobulated, but I'm okay. I'm fine. It's quite hot in Berlin.
Yeah, we are talking remotely today. We've been back home for just over a week, haven't we? So this is our first regular podcast back, and we'll continue on a weekly basis until the Vuelta, where we resume with nightly podcasts and also Kilometre Zero. And hoping to be joined a bit more by you there, Daniel. Looking forward to that.
Yep, me too, Rich. Very much so.
Bring it on. Another Grand Tour just around the corner. But Lionel, there has been quite a lot of racing over the weekend. And you, I think, have your usual weekly news roundup. So please tell us it.
Indeed. Well, the World Tour continued with the San Sebastian Classic, which was won by Michał Kwiatkowski of Team Sky, ahead of Tony Gallopin and last year's winner Bauke Mollema. Tom Dumoulin and Mikel Landa were also in the winning move. So it was a bit like a mountain stage of the Tour de France, really, but with Tom Dumoulin also in there, the Giro champion. A great race. We'll talk about that in part one of the podcast. The San Sebastian Classic also brought down the curtain on Jaime Zubeldia's career. He's retiring at the age of 40 and he finished 29th in the race. Meanwhile, the Tour of Poland is underway. That will finish at the weekend, but Peter Sagan won the opening stage. That's his first race back in action after being disqualified from the Tour de France for his part in the Mark Cavendish crash in Vittel. Alexander Kristoff made partial amends for failing to win a stage of the Tour de France by winning the Ride London Surrey Classic on the Mole on Sunday. He beat Orica's Magnus Cort Nielsen into second place, and the Tour de France green jersey winner Michael Matthews was third. That was a much-anticipated sprint finish, and it came after two breakaway riders, Matteo Trentin and Jasper Stuyven, were caught in the final kilometre. The evening before the men's race, there was the women's criterium, La Classique. Corinne Rivera of Sunweb won the sprint. Real wet conditions for that race, but there weren't too many crashes, but there were a lot of punctures. Meanwhile, Tour de France champion Chris Froome has confirmed that he'll be riding the Vuelta a España to try and add that race to his list of victories. He's never won the Vuelta, of course, been second several times. The race starts on August the 19th. Gianni Moscon of Sky is back racing. He was suspended for 6 weeks by Team Sky after using racist language towards Francis Dejeur's Kevin Razor during the Tour of Romandy. The UCI announced this week that they are not going to punish him any further because any suspension that they would have given would have run concurrently with the suspension that Team Sky had given to Moscon. There's also a little bit of transfer news. I think we'll talk transfer news in part 2 of the podcast, but one confirmed transfer in the women's scene is that Kasia Niewiadoma will be joining Canyon SRAM from WM3 Pro Cycling next season. But Daniel is our transfer man, and he will be giving us a heads up on what to expect in the transfer market when the window opens on August the 1st.
My Jim White. I spoke to Jim White the other day. He just phoned me up. No, he hosts a programme on TalkSport Radio, and he wanted to talk to me about why Chris Froome was not more popular in the United Kingdom. Anyway.
I've got a Jim White story. Jim White, of course, is a Scottish presenter on Sky Sports. Very charismatic guy. Love him or hate him. Some people love him, some people not so keen on him. But I was doing a Sky Sports thing a few years ago, and he was presenting, and before the bit on cycling, there was an item on the England players who'd been supposed to be playing Poland, I think, and the game was postponed 24 hours because of a waterlogged pitch, if I recall. But the problem is a lot of the England players had taken stimulants, legal stimulants for the game, and then had to take sleeping pills to get to sleep when the game was postponed. So there were doubts about whether they were going to be fit for the game the next night. You're looking surprised, Daniel, but this was an actual story. And while the item was running, Jim White turned to me, a fellow Scot, and said, I think our boys have been on sleeping pills for about 20 years, Richard, which I thought was very funny. Anyway, back to cycling. You mentioned, Lionel, the Classic of San Sebastian, which was on Saturday. There was a bit of a double header over the weekend, 2 big one-day races, San Sebastian Saturday, Ride London on Sunday. Both really good races, actually, both interesting races. But watching San Sebastian, it was a real thriller, especially at the end. I know the course pretty well. I've ridden my bike around there. That climb that climbs up from the sort of suburbs of San Sebastian up the Moorgill, I think it's called, the climb. It's a very, very minor road, very, very steep indeed. And it provided a really thrilling climax to the race when that group got away. And it's great to see a rider like Dumoulin back racing and racing well, going head-to-head with some of the guys who've come out of the Tour with good form, Kwiatkowski and Landa, of course, among them. And I thought the course for San Sebastian is not dissimilar to the Ardennes Classics, or, the Ardennes Classics could be run on a similar sort of course, but San Sebastian often is a far more exciting race. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about why that was, either of you.
I don't think it's an intimidating course, is it? And certainly in recent years, until the addition of a new climb, was it 3 or 4 years ago, the Jaiskabel was not really splitting the field in the way that it once did. But it's a course where I think teams and riders feel that they can be aggressive, and it's also a race which people take part in, having come out of the Tour de France with great form, and it's often relatively aggressive compared to the Ardennes Classics. And the difference with the Ardennes Classics is that Flèche and Liège do actually finish up steep climbs as well, don't they? So people have always got that, or they can always wait and sort of try to make the difference on the final climb, whereas in San Sebastian the onus is on the riders to really try something in the last 15, 20, 30 kilometres. Yeah,
I think the fact that it's the week after the Tour de France means that everybody's in roaring form, and unlike Liège-Bastogne-Liège, where, as Daniel says, there's the incentive to wait, San Sebastian, it's a big race, it's an important race, but it doesn't have the same kind of be-all or end-all type feel that Liège-Bastogne-Liège has, because, basically people build their springs around trying to win one of the Ardennes Classics, don't they? And really, that isn't the case for San Sebastian. And so you see this kind of no-holds-bars type racing that we saw on Saturday, and particularly with riders like Kwiatkowski and Landa, who'd been in fantastic form for Sky at the Tour de France. Mollema, who of course won this race last year and then pulled off that fantastic 30-kilometre solo escape to win a Tour stage. He was in that move. As you said, Richard Dumoulin returning to sort of high-profile racing after his Giro d'Italia win. A real sort of A-list group of riders there, all trying to win the race, and you don't often see that. You often see people trying not to lose the race first and hoping that it sort of swings their way. Whereas on this particular course, there's that opportunity to make the difference on the climb, and then the strongest riders get away, and then it's it's dueling it out on the streets coming into the finish there. And aside from that, it looks absolutely stunning on the TV. San Sebastian looks like a fantastic city. It's got that beautiful coastline as well. In terms of something to watch on the television, it knocks Liège-Bastogne-Liège into a cocked hat, I'd say.
It does. It is the most beautiful city in the world, probably, San Sebastian. No, it was...
What kind of a claim is that?
It is, I think.
They put it on all their brochures, so it must be true.
Yeah, no, I think there's a strong argument for that. No, it was a tremendous race, and I mean, you say that riders don't build the season around it, but it is a race that a lot of riders really like. I remember Nicolas Roche asked him what race would he most like to win, and he said the San Sebastian Classic. It's his favourite race on the calendar. And you see riders like Mollema, who obviously won last year, Tony Galopin, former winner, up there again for it. I was quite surprised to see Dumoulin racing so well against those guys who are just out the Tour and holding on to that form from the Tour. He must have been working hard over the summer. He's not going to the Vuelta, of course, but Obviously still in great form. And as I mentioned, that climb at the end is very, very hard indeed. And so for him to follow those guys up there was pretty impressive when, he's maybe not the most explosive of climbers. But Kwiatkowski is worth, again, the vanity signing, proving his worth once again. I mean, he was fantastic at the Tour de France, obviously as a teammate. But look at the season he's having on top of that. I mean, Milan-San Remo winner, he won Strade Bianche this year as well, didn't he? And now he's won San Sebastian. That is an incredible, it will be his best season to date, won't it?
Hell of a signing. What a great decision.
Well, I can't remember anybody ever questioning it.
No. He's also not a bad dancer. By the standards of professional cyclists, he's also not a bad dancer. I learned this the other day. I can't say how or who told me this, but anyway. He has this kind of nonchalance about him that he can really turn his hand to pretty much anything. And he's quite enviable, really, the ability that he has to, do everything on a bike and off a bike, apparently. Anyway, no, he has. I've been proven wrong on this, haven't I? Absolutely, because it did seem as though at a time when Sky were almost raiding the opposition for riders who might pose a threat in the future at some point. So they signed Mikel Landa and they signed Kwiatkowski at the same time. And Kwiatkowski had come off a not particularly sparkling season. It was the season after he won the World Championships, wasn't it? And you wondered whether they were going to try and repurpose him as a general classification rider. And if that was going to be the case, then where would he fit in? He would perhaps be a leader in the Vuelta or the Giro and then be helping Froome primarily in the Tour de France. But where he has really been worth his weight in gold has been in winning big races and winning Milan-San Remo, for example, this year, San Sebastian, Strade Bianche. And then what he did at the Tour de France was really, it was kind of a bonus ball, but played an incredible role and really made everyone forget that Geraint Thomas pulled out of the race at the end of the first weekend, because Geraint Thomas in a way is a similar rider. He's a guy who can, for a leader, he can do almost any job. He can be the last guy on a mountain stage and he can be the guy that keeps the leader out of trouble on the flat. And Kwiatkowski did all of that and more at the Tour de France. And I think most importantly, seems to be quite happy doing it. And there's no sense of angst or that he wants to be the leader himself. And
well, at the moment, Daniel, but is that sustainable? I mean, is he going to do that again next year?
I think he's also very realistic about his abilities. As I said, my concern was that he was going to be sort of railroaded towards the Grand Tours, and I personally don't think that he's quite there yet as a Grand Tour contender, or could be there. I mean, we've seen his limitations on numerous occasions in the high mountains. There's a huge difference, as we know, between, and we've seen this with Thomas as well, between putting in the odd outstanding performance in the mountains and having to do it day after day after day. And in fact, if you were to really closely analyse his Tour de France this year, he wasn't the best domestique in the mountains day after day after day, but some of the performances he put in were outstanding. So I think he'll be best served for the next few years targeting the hard one-day races. And as I said, he's fortunate enough, and Sky are fortunate enough, that he also does have it in his locker to ride a brilliant Tour de France as a super domestique. But I think that's the perfect role for him.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport. Fueled by science.
Thank you very much indeed to our sponsor, Science in Sport, for sponsoring the Cycling Podcast throughout 2017. You may have heard during the Tour de France we played some nutrition-themed features in conjunction with Science in Sport. We'll be playing more of them at the Vuelta. And one thing we have to mention, two things we have to mention in connection to Science in Sport. One is their Premier delivery service. If you sign up for SIS Premier for £9.99, you get unlimited next day delivery, early access to new products, world-class nutrition advice, and a free gift worth £28. For more information, go to www.scienceinsport.com/the cycling podcast. So it's sciencesport.com/the cycling podcast. There's also a new discount code for cycling podcast listeners. It is CPAUG20, CPAUG20. So when you go to the checkout at sciencesport.com, enter that code and you'll get 20% off all your products. Thank you very much indeed to Science and Sport. Now, we haven't really finished wrapping up the racing and we're going to move on to Ride London, but before we do, A quick word for a friend of the podcast, Haimar Zubeldia, who Lionel mentioned in the news roundup, has retired now. That was his final race, San Sebastian. We had a little interview with him towards the end of the Tour de France. So after a very long career, Zubeldia has ghosted out of the peloton.
Yeah, he has ghosted out of the peloton, Rich, but when you look at his career, what a stage racer he's been, and the fact that he's raced on to the age of 40, his results speak for themselves, really. The first time I remember him was when he finished second in the Dauphiné, I think in 99 or 2000. It's that long ago. And, he was part of the Euskaltel team, obviously the Basque national team, really. And he was then their GC rider for, a long time. And it's an affectionate joke that we've had at his expense, I guess, in the fact that he had this knack of finishing very high up in the Tour de France overall standings. 5 times in the top 10, I think. Highest position 5th, although upgraded to 4th after disqualifications and things. But he would ghost into the top 10 really without ever threatening to win a stage.
Or catch anyone's eye.
Or catch anyone's eye, yeah. And I think in a career that goes back to the 1990s, I think 4 or 5 road race wins in his career. It's just not a finisher. The anti-Michał Kwiatkowski in many ways.
Absolutely. I'm sure we'll see Zubeldia around at races. I'm not sure what his plans are, but I can see him appearing at the...
Gregarious, larger-than-life character that he is. I'm sure we won't be able to miss him.
No, but, I mean, I say we'll see him. I'm sure he'll be at races. I'm not sure if we'll see him.
He'll just sneak up onto the shoulder, won't he? You'll just turn around and he'll be there.
He could work for the cycling podcast, couldn't he? We could employ him as a mole.
That's if he doesn't pursue the career that Lionel suggested for him during the tour as a private investigator.
Haimar Zubeldia, PI, I think is just, it's made for him. He can ghost around in the shadows, finding things out without anyone noticing.
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. Anyway, Ride London was the other one-day race at the weekend, and it was a pretty decent race, thanks largely to Matteo Trentin, who got away with Daryl Impey, and Peter Kenyuk on Box Hill. First time up Box Hill, I think, with about 70 kilometres to go. A move set up by Team Sky. Theo Geoghegan-Hart rode very hard into that climb and up the bottom of it. Then Peter Kenyuk attacked, got away with those two. Then Kenyuk, I thought, sat up. Some people on Twitter told me that actually he didn't have the legs to go with those two. I'm not sure what the reality was of that situation. It looked like he'd sat up to me, but I could be wrong. I wasn't in his body at the time, or mind, so I'm not sure. Jasper Stuyven got across late on. Impey got dropped. And Stuyven and Trentin, they're almost identical riders in a lot of ways. Both really strong kind of ruler types who can also get up a climb. And very few duos could have held off the bunch in the way that they did for so long, but they did. And there were moments where it looked like they might hold on, but they didn't. And as you said, Alexander Kristoff won the race. In the end, it came down to what looked like a bunch sprint, but actually that bare statistic masks the excitement that there was in the race. Yeah,
Rich, it was an exciting race, and it wasn't just a run-of-the-mill bunch sprint, although that's how the last sort of kilometre worked out. Michael Matthews, who finished third, said that he'd felt not great in the early part of the race and perhaps would have preferred a climb closer to the finish line, but that would require redesigning the southeast of England and the run into London from Box Hill. There's not really any great opportunities, I don't think, to run it up any significant hills in the last sort of 5 or 6 kilometres. There's the drag that Daryl Impey got dropped on, which I think is that Wimbledon?
Up to Wimbledon Village, yeah.
That's your neck of the woods, really, isn't it, Rich?
It's a tough old climb. That I've been up there on a folding bike. I can tell you it's very hard indeed.
Well, I think Stuyven and Trentin probably would have dropped you as well, wouldn't they, up there? But
possibly.
But as you saw with the way the peloton hit that, it was a bump for them, really. But an interesting race, and I think David Miller made the point in commentary that it was much more aggressively raced, possibly as a result of the World Tour status which the race has this year. I mean, that does change people's perceptions of it and the importance of it quite considerably, I think.
The roaring tailwind as well, coming back into London. helped the guys in front and also just made the race look even faster, more furious, and more exciting. Our
friend Filippo Pozzato seemed to have a pretty eventful day. Judging by, I didn't really follow the race that closely, but from afar it looked as though he had about a 30-kilometre sticky bottle, tried to hitchhike. He had a ride with a 12-year-old kid, gave him a bit of a clinic, a rolling clinic on his way to the finish. He visited the London Eye, the Tower of London, the London Dungeon, all before he reached the finish line. Did he even reach the finish line? And he prepared, do you know how he prepared? Judging from his Instagram, about 3 o'clock in the afternoon the day before, he was on a yacht in Ibiza, and about 3 o'clock in the afternoon the day after, today, in fact, about an hour ago, he was again on a yacht in Ibiza or off Ibiza. So
I don't know how he did that. I mean, was it even him? I mean, bizarre. Anyway, no, he gave that kid a pair of his mitts that he was wearing as well, which is very nice. I mean, he's obviously a perfect gentleman and a very accessible star, which is what Filippo Pozzato is these days.
I think he still had the wristband or the stamp from the nightclub he'd been in the night before under the mitts. Anyway.
Ah, dear. Listen, transfer news, Daniel. This is your area. We're speaking. I mean, this is very badly timed, isn't it? It's the 31st of July. This podcast will come out in a day or so, and by then we may know some big transfers. We may not. There's no sort of real protocol with this in cycling. But Quick-Step have confirmed today that Bob Jungels, who was very much sought after by a number of teams, including Team Sky, has renewed with them for 3 more years. It hasn't even been an official announcement that the team is continuing, but they have renewed with a few riders, and he is the latest, the most high profile really, and the guy around whom they may build a sort of Grand Tour team. Because Dan Martin may leave, may he not. But any other news, Daniel?
I mean, as always, there's going to be a bit of a domino effect, and really a large slice of the market is tied to the destiny of a few, or the decisions of a few riders, particularly as far as general classification is concerned. And there are only, 3 or 4 big names still left and still up for grabs, and obviously more teams than that who are very keen to get their hands on a big GC rider because they're losing someone or because they're not really particularly well covered in that area. So you've got Aru, who's out of contract at Astana, and in the spring his agent was touting him around, or he was wanting about 3 million euros. I remember at the Giro, and Alexander Vinokurov, the team manager at Astana, was sort of scoffing at that, saying, well, no chance, we wouldn't even pay him half. But then all of a sudden, when Aru had a very good start to the Tour de France, that started to look like a more realistic valuation. But by that time, I think he may have made an agreement with the UAE team. So that looks to be where he's going to go. And that, of course, leaves Astana, who have traditionally been a GC team, a very, very strong GC team. I mean, they've gone from having Nibali and Aru in the space of 2 years to potentially having neither of them, and to be backing or to be putting all their eggs in the baskets of Jakob Fuglsang and Miguel Angel Lopez, the Colombian, who of course has had a lot of injury problems the last couple of years. So you would think that they'd still be in the market for a big GC rider, but who's left? And Mikel Landa could potentially be left. We think he may well have done a deal with Movistar, although I don't think Sky will have given him up without a fight. I'm sure they will have made him a very financially attractive offer. Who else? There is Dan Martin, as you say, Rich. I think that he will probably stay with Quick-Step. I think he will want to stay with Quick-Step. Whether they can offer him the money he's looking for, I'm not sure. Quick-Step have had this problem for a few years now, 3 or 4 years. They're victims of their own success in the same way that HTC Columbia were a few years ago. That their riders have been very, very successful for 3 or 4 years now, and when they come to renew their contracts, their values have been inflated by 50, 100, 200%. And that's probably the case with Dan Martin. You would think that he'll be looking for more money than his last contract, but have Quick-Step got more money? And Uran is the other big name who might be up for grabs. And you would think that Astana, for example, would look at him, but Cannondale are sort of surfing this wave of confidence and sort of positivity since Uran's excellent Tour de France, and they'll be feeling that they want to build on that and build a team around him for the next few years. So it's going to be those riders in particular It's going to be intriguing to see where they end up and what happens.
Yeah, Dan Martin's an interesting one. You say he will probably want to stay at Quick Step, and we talked quite a lot during the Tour de France about how Quick Step have got to split their duties between helping Marcel Kittel and helping Dan Martin, and a couple of occasions where Dan Martin was left kind of on his own, but he's quite happy riding that way, I think. But when you look at his results this season, you wouldn't be surprised if somebody who had a gap would look at him very seriously. Second at both Liège-Bastogne-Liège and Flèche-Wallonne, third at both Paris-Nice and the Dauphiné, and sixth at the Tour de France. And, announcing this week on social media that he rode that with a couple of fractured vertebrae. I mean, he went through the pain barrier and beyond to get that sixth place, and looked one of the few riders willing to attack and put everything on the line day after day. Certainly, you would think that there would be teams queuing up to take him.
Absolutely, Lionel. Dan Martin really has had an outstanding season. Not perhaps the big win, that he's had in some previous seasons, but certainly his best season overall in terms of consistency of performance. I mean, what's interesting is a lot of this transfer speculation was well advanced even before the Tour. I mean, on Quick Step, Patrick Lefevre, although I think he's going to renew with the existing sponsors of the team, he did say during the Tour that he would not have any additional budget. That might be a comment aimed at agents as much as anybody, because all his riders were out of contract, which is, a real headache, I would imagine, when it comes to renewing. But the other thing is, a lot of the riders you mentioned will have come out of the Tour with their values enhanced, and if Landa agreed a deal with Movistar, say, before the Tour, but didn't actually sign, you wonder if what happened at the Tour might have changed things a little bit, because, there are lots of teams, including Trek Segafredo, who are faced with the prospect, even if Alberto Contador carries on, he's not going to win the Tour de France again. Bauke Mollema is probably not going to win the Tour de France. And so a team like that would be potentially in the market for someone like Mikel Landa or even Rigoberto Urán. Urán as well has come out of the Tour with his value enhanced, as has Fabio Aru. So it does change things from that point of view. Another rumour that has been going around this week is Warren Barguil to Fortuneo Oscaro, or the French team as they were known at the Tour de France by Lionel. That seems unlikely, doesn't it, Daniel? I mean, Barguil seems very settled at Sunweb.
Well, I think the rumour, Rich, is that he would go to the new team being created by Jérôme Pinault, which is going to be a professional continental division team, and they are effectively hijacking the sponsor of Fortuneo Oscaro, the old sponsor. So the new team's going to be called Vital Concept. And Barguil has dropped hints in the press. He said that he wouldn't be averse to going back to ride in France. But then there's also a bit of confusion about whether his contract does indeed expire at the end of the year. I've heard suggestions to both effects that he has another year at Sunweb and that indeed it does expire at the end of the year. I mean, I think that it would be probably smart for him to stay where he is, providing that Sunweb can pay him what he wants to earn, because that team is already well covered with Tom Dumoulin for general classification, and Barguil, as we saw in the Tour, really wants to have this sort of free flaneuring role, and he wants to ride aggressively and doesn't want to be burdened with too many expectations at the Tour de France. He's also been linked with Team Sky. I don't believe that I'm sure they're interested, and I'm sure they've inquired about him, but I don't think that's likely to happen.
That's been a couple of years that's been mentioned. Daniel, a question for you, a serious question for you. How can you be both aggressive and whimsical?
It's more about...
Is he whimsically aggressive?
He is, but it's more about the manner. I mean, okay, he's tactically he might be aggressive, but in sort of demeanour, in, comportement, he's very whimsical. He goes,
aggressively whimsical.
Yeah, he always has this sort of insouciant air about him, even when he's attacking, even when he's, biting people's legs off effectively in the mountains of the Tour.
The thing is, this scenario of the French rider having a breakthrough Tour and then signing a huge contract with a French team, It doesn't often end well, that, does it?
No, and there is always going to be a premium, I suppose, on French riders for French teams on the back of Tours de France. I think the origin or the rumour of Barguil going to Sky, I mean, that comes from hints that Dave Brailsford has dropped in the press on numerous occasions about, really liking the idea of sort of grooming a French rider for Tour de France glory. But as I say, I just don't think that really stacks up. Sky are going to have to make some reinforcements, though, definitely in the mountains. If Landa goes, which we think he will, and Nieve, who was probably his second most valuable domestique in the mountains this year, if he is going to go to Orica Scott, which is what reports suggest, then Sky, I think will probably look to promote sort of Diego Rosa from their Giro team from this year. He'll probably be considered someone who might move up to the sort of the Froome team, the A team in the Tour de France. But I think they're going to have to look elsewhere for a sort of ace climbing domestique, largely because the guys they're rumoured to be signing in this transfer window or have been rumoured to be signing are young guys, some Sivakov, the under-23, the star of the under-23 scene this year, and Egan Bernal, who they're taking from Androni Sidimate. They're not going to be ready to ride in Froome's sort of coterie of domestique. So they've got Castro Viejo coming from Movistar, but he's a guy who's more noted for his time trialling than his climbing. So I'm sure they'll be looking to strengthen in that area as well.
Hi, my name's Simon. I work at Rapha and I'm head of R&D. Rapha has challenged the market in so many different ways from a product standpoint, particularly from aesthetics, from a quality angle, from a fit and execution point of view, also from a graphics point of view as well. In terms of innovation, I think we've done quite a lot to challenge convention. Certainly our use of merino blends in the early years was pretty distinctive and very new and fresh. And we've seen lots of the people in the market come and follow us from there.
The Rapha Cycling Club is the largest global community of its kind. Members share their passion for the road through rides, events, exclusive club kit and racing. Find out more at rapha.cc.
Thank you very much indeed to Rapha, our main sponsor throughout 2017. Their support is absolutely invaluable. And on the eve of the tour, they launched a range of clothing, cycling podcast themed clothing, Peddler de Charme themed clothing, a cap, a t-shirt and a cycling jersey. There was overwhelming demand and the cycling jersey actually sold out very quickly, but it is being remade and it will be available again soon. There will also be a female range of clothing, female sizes and Peddlers de Charme. So we'll keep you posted on that. And we will go to the Vuelta, of course, armed with Peddler de Charme t-shirts to present one a week to the riders there. We've got one outstanding from the tour actually to give to Thomas de Gent, who was overlooked for the overall combativity award. It went to the whimsical flaneur instead. But yes, thank you very much indeed to Rapha to buy the clothing and do go on and buy a t-shirt or a cap or both. Go to rapha.cc or go to thecyclingpodcast.com, and if you click on the shop, that will take you to Rapha where you can buy our clothing. And by buying our clothing, you are supporting the podcast. And by becoming a friend of the podcast, you're also supporting the podcast. And we must say thanks very much to everybody who's signed up as a friend during and since the Tour de France. We offered you a few things during and since. We did 2 episodes, the Road Trip 1 and the Road Trip 2, which aren't friend specials, but what we're calling Tour Extra. And they were sort of behind the scenes with us on the tour. Covering
extraordinary stuff in there, Rich, isn't there? I mean,
groundbreaking, covering aspects of covering the tour that perhaps we don't share in the regular podcast. Well, we definitely don't share in the regular podcast. So, and
an awful lot of mocking me was involved in the recording of that.
Well, I mean, yeah, each episode is about 1 hour long. In total, is about 1 hour and 45 minutes of mocking Lionel. So you get your money's worth if you sign up, and it's £10 for the year. Go to thecyclingpodcast.com. Not only do you get these exclusive episodes, but you also support us, and so we're very grateful to all of you who have signed up. It's very much appreciated. And our most recent Friends special was one that was released just after the tour. It was following me in the Cannondale Drapac team car on day 1 in the Alps, the stage to Cher Chevalier. And it was an eventful day, and I was sitting in the car with Ken Van Mark, who is Sepp Van Mark's brother, and we were in radio contact with Charlie Wigelius in Team Car 1. It was really good. It was a really good day, and we've had great feedback to the podcast. I think people really feel like they were taken inside the race, so thank you for the feedback. And we thought what we'd do in this first regular episode post-tour was play you an extended extract. Apologies if you are a friend of the podcast and you've heard this already. You can just skip the next 10 minutes. But if you're not a friend of the podcast, maybe this will persuade you to sign up. So here it is. Here's a 10-minute extract from my day in the Cannondale Drapac team car at the Tour de France.
Official start of the day stage at 16 minutes past 12. Stage 17 of the Tour de France between Lamure and Serge Chevalier. 183 kilometers of racing today. 183 kilometers of racing. 172 riders at the start. One non-starter, number 138. 138. Marcel Sieberg, Lotto Sudal.
Okay, boys, here it comes. Listen, don't look out there for motivation. Don't look out for anything, because you've always had everything you've always needed. Every day of your life, you've had everything you've always needed. You have it. You have it within you. And you just need to look inside you, find that namneste, huh? And you just pull it out and use it, because today's the day. Today's the first day of the rest of your life. There's going to be a pre today and there's going to be a post today. Let's make it happen. Let's do it. Come on! We're going to kill him! We're killing him today! We're going to kill him!
Come on, everybody.
Charlie, you were going to brief me on the rules for being the team car.
Yeah, we've just got a few ground rules. Number 1, no eye contact with the driver. Number 2, no grabbing the steering wheel. Number 3, no air braking with your legs. Number 3, where are we now? 4. Don't open the door without prior permission from the driver. We don't want to door a mechanic who's on his way to take someone out of a precarious situation. And number 5, you can only eat when the director eats.
Yeah, am I allowed to hold on to the Jesus handles? Or might that unnerve the driver?
Yeah, no groaning and grunting in the corners either. But it's the air braking that's the worst, I think. And I had someone grab the steering wheel once. That wasn't great. Si dice il peccato ma non il peccatore.
I'll do my best to observe these rules. Are you enjoying having somebody up there in contention still?
Yeah, of course, but it's wrecking.
I get that impression. I can feel the tension around the bus.
Exactly, yeah. No, it's like I'm waking up early in the morning, let's say that, and just like, oh, okay, I'm ready to go. What time is it? Oh, 5:03.
But the one person who seems immune to that is Iran himself.
Yeah, it's true. That's why I kind of honestly stay away from him, because I don't want him to pick up on the fact that I'm nervous.
For stage 17 of this year's Tour de France, the first of 2 in the Alps from Lamure to Cher Chevalier, I joined Cannondale Drapac in team car number 2. We heard at the start from Sean Fowler, the team chef, with a motivational talk he shared with the riders. Not sure if it helped. Then we heard from Charlie Wigelius, the sports director, and Jonathan Vaughters, general manager or CEO. Driving team car number 2 was Ken Van Mark, the brother of Sepp Van Mark, the Belgian classic specialist who rides for the team. We'll hear a lot from Ken in this episode, but also from Charlie, whose voice, coming through the radio, filled our car throughout the day. Charlie sounded calm, authoritative, in control, but it wasn't just Vaughters who was feeling the tension. I detected a heightened state of anxiety and nerves around the whole team, with Rigoberto Urán on the brink of a podium finish, and with the possibility that he might actually win the Tour. It was an eventful day for Cannondale Drapac. It might not all be clear, because I was under strict instructions not to speak at crucial moments, so when you hear the horn blasting and Ken swearing, it's because 3 riders, Taylor Phinney, Nate Brown and Paddy Bevan, were involved in an early crash. Later, we drive through the peloton to position ourselves behind a breakaway that included 2 more of their riders, Alberto Bettiol and Dylan van Baarle. And we have a ringside view as Alberto Contador bridges across from bunch to break. I'd like to say thanks to Cannondale Drapac for inviting us inside their team car. I hope you enjoy hearing what it's like on a huge mountain stage in the world's biggest race. What are the rules for a mountain stage in the car?
Just pay very good attention to the road, and especially in the descents. That's pretty tricky, and also, you have to see if riders are coming from behind and think like a rider also. That's the most important thing.
Kilometer 0. Were you a rider, Ken, yourself?
Yeah, I've been racing for 15 years myself. Yeah.
As a professional?
No, not. No. I was 1 year in a continental team, but not as a professional.
How do you become a director sportif?
Of course. With I started with taking course of to be trainer, and then I got Then we started talking if there was a possibility to have some sort of education with Lotto Jumbo, and they agreed on that. So they had they gave a personal education on training, and also they asked if I was interested in becoming a DS, and because they could also use me to be a second DS in smaller races. So I was very happy to do that, and from then it started rolling.
Do you have to do any sort of advanced driving courses or anything like that? Because the driving part requires a lot of skill.
No, you have to follow a course in Swiss, in Aigle, from the UCI, and but not the driving skills. They give theory, but not really driving skills. I think it's very important that you used to be a rider, so you can think as a rider, and you just cannot be scared, of course. And it's not that it's crazy, but you have to be able to.
It can be crazy though, can't it?
If it has to. A lot of people say it's not possible to follow a bike rider in the descent, but you have to, and that's it. So it is possible, but you have to go pretty hard sometimes.
So we're in team car number 2, Charlie Wigelius and Andreas Clear, I think team car 1 today. Can you explain what team car 2 does, what your role is in the race?
If we have people in the breakaway, then it's always race car 2. In the early breakaway, it's always race car 2 that goes behind that. And if not, like in a mountain stage, then you have to take care of the riders that are dropped. The heavy riders, not climbers, they get into a big group, and they also need bidons and rain jackets if necessary. So you have to drive up and down all the time to find all your riders and several groups, and to help them and provide them with food and drink.
Okay, so there's 30 riders in front, 3 chasers. Unfortunately, we didn't get all the numbers on the radio. The gap is 3 minutes. Michael Matthews is there, Dylan is there, and Alberto is there, which is just great for us. Okay? So Ken's going to come on over, and then we go from there. So there's 2 riders from AG2R and 3 good riders from Trek Segafredo. That's the most important information for us. So Dylan and Alberto, in front, you keep your eyes on those 2 from AG2R and the 3 from Trek Segafredo. 3:20.
Well done, Ken.
It's never a really nice thing to do.
It's difficult riding through the peloton like that. I mean, especially on these roads, they're not exactly wide.
Yeah, it's not the nicest thing to do. We had it in Dauphiné. I had it that I was in the middle of the peloton in a descent, and I swear you're sweating a lot. It's really hard work then, but okay, it's part of the job, and I'm always happy that I passed that peloton. It's always a
relief.
Yeah, for sure.
It's an amazing, no matter how much you see bike racing, it's amazing to be in the peloton at the Tour de France like that, with these riders all around you, kind of, they're not exactly riding hard at the moment, but they're suffering, and you know it's quite a vantage point you have when you're stuck in the middle of it like that.
Yeah. It's very exciting, but it takes a lot of energy of you to pass them, because you know they're all big riders, and you just don't wanna. That's the biggest nightmare of a DS, that you hit somebody.
Very good, Alberto. Super.
Oh, it must be Macron. All the security there.
Oh yeah, okay.
But where? I didn't see him.
Yeah, he's in the red car here.
Ah, he's just come into the race, has he?
Yeah, probably. Still, I want to be with my rider.
Can you drive alongside him so I can get a quick interview?
Okay. Something more? How many are dropped now? 3.
Contador.
Fuck.
Contador just standing at the side of the road.
Making a bike change in front.
Whoa.
Contador's making a bike change in front. Alberto, keep going, Alberto.
That must be unscheduled, or he'd have got the car up.
The chain is dropped.
Oh.
No, that was not.
Yeah, the chain is dropped.
Chain was off.
Yeah, but
He's dropping
Oh,
from
jeez.
there.
Don't pull, Alberto, don't pull.
Yeah.
Don't pull. Stai a ruota. Continui, però stai a ruota sempre. Sempre a ruota.
Oh, there's Contador back. Well, we just dropped off the Quadifert at about 100 kilometers an hour. I must admit, I held onto the handles a little bit, and might have pressed the floor with my legs. But my lunch is still in my stomach, which is good.
Go!
So that was an extract from my day in the Cannondale Drapac team at the Tour de France. And if that has tempted you to sign up as a friend of the podcast, go to thecyclingpodcast.com, pay your £10 there, and that for the year will gain you access to our 11 Friends specials and lots of other bonus material as well.
I hate giving you any praise whatsoever, Richard, as you know, but that was an exceptional episode. Really, sort of, I've travelled in a team car at races before, not at the Tour de France, but at classics and stage races, and you kind of forget really just how edge of the seat it really is in there, and just what came across most in all of the recording was just how ice cool Ken Van Mark and Charlie Wegelius were, considering the job they're doing, you know, sometimes mere inches away from the riders, overtaking the peloton. I mean, I sort of held my breath as Ken Van Mark was overtaking the peloton.
Well, yeah, not even overtaking, but driving right through it. It's bizarre, really.
Well, exactly, yeah, and it's no, it was a real kind of treat to kind of hear what it's like in the team car, and it will probably give people an insight into, you know, what it's actually like being a sports director on the tour.
Must say again, thank you very much to Cannondale Drapac, who obviously let us do that and set it up, and you know, that's something that they are quite famous for doing, being very open like that, even when they've got a rider going for the win, as he was at that point, Rigoberto Urán. So thank you very much indeed to Cannondale Drapac. And that's pretty much all we've got time for this week, chaps. We'll reconvene next week when we'll maybe have some concrete transfer news and obviously other races to discuss as well.
Lionel was very quiet when we were speculating, wasn't he? I thought he went to feed the cat, didn't he?
Shifting in my seat, just feeling really, really anxious about it. Just until I see confirmation from the official team outlets, I'm just not interested.
Okay, well, you should have lots to say next week, we hope. Anyway, that's all for this week. Thank you very much, Lionel.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast. Thank you to Glass Pair for the music in this episode. For more information and to download more editions of the show, visit thecyclingpodcast.com.